Hi, I'm Renee Williams,
And I'm Billy Thomas.
and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today.
I'm glad to have you all with us today. We appreciate it very much. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, welcome. You can use the comment section to interact with us. And if you're on Zoom, please use the chat function. But Renee, I'm excited about today's show.
Oh, yes, definitely. We have a lot of good speakers today.
Yeah, we do. And, we're talking about Adopt a Tree. It's a pretty cool program that came out of here at UK Urban Forestry Initiative. We have Nick Williamson, who kind of runs that program here at UK for us, and he's going to be talking about the Adopt a Tree program. We also have our ever popular Tree of the Week, and this is kind of a really big a big fruit on this tree. We'll just leave it at that. It almost has a stately name, if you will, and I'll save it for Laurie to talk about
All right.
here in a minute. And then we have Dr. Ellen Crocker. She's going to be talking about some of those pesky plants that are out there. And
There's a lot of them.
I know, Renee, and as we're getting warmer and warmer, we're going to start seeing a lot of things popping up with new flowers that maybe you haven't seen before. So, you really want to pay attention to what Dr. Crocker is going to be sharing today. But we're delighted to have you all with us today.
We are. So let's get started with the Adopt a Tree. Nick, if you can turn your camera on.
Hello, Nick.
Hi there.
Hi, folks. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. And tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about today.
Sure. Well, so my name's Nick Williamson. I work with the UK Urban Forest Initiative. And today I'm going to be talking about a program called Adopt a Tree that anyone and everyone with a tape measure and a couple minutes could take part in.
Well, good. We hope you inspire a lot of folks to go out and adopt trees. They provide so much for us. So I'm looking forward to your segment.
Thanks for having me.
Sure.
All righty. So yeah, as mentioned, Adopt a Kentucky Tree. So we're talking about a program here that allows participants to describe, measure, and learn more about a favorite tree of yours. And I decided to start here with a picture of the blooming redbud tree, because I don't know about you all, but looking forward to spring and seeing those redbuds start to burst. I wanted to just start with the link. So those of you who sitting at a computer or on a smartphone, you could bring up the Adopt a Tree website. So I think one of the foundational questions with this whole idea of adopting a tree is what is your favorite tree? What is your favorite tree? So I'm going to start. My favorite tree was probably a tree that I had in my backyard as a kid. A tree that I actually got to plant in kindergarten. Every kindergartner got a sapling that they got to take home and plant. And I was lucky enough to have a yard to plant that tree in. And I just have such fond memories of climbing this tree as a kid growing up. It was one of those trees where you knew where every branch was, because I'd climbed it so many times. I knew just where all the good branches were to climb and hang on to. And yeah, I just have that feeling of getting up in the canopy of a tree and sort of being transported to this other place. Watching storm clouds roll in, sort of being up above the houses and just feeling like you're in your own sort of special world. So for me, that was my favorite tree. And the bug of climbing trees stuck, and there I am in a tree. I'm an arborist and work with the forestry department here at UK. So that tree had a lot of impact on me, I think. And one of the ideas with this Adopt a Tree program is to get to this question of why do we appreciate trees, or how do we think about a special tree that's around us? So these are a few of our adopters' reasons for loving the trees that they've adopted. And I imagine that some of you on this webinar could relate to some of these sentiments, whether it's just appreciating a tree that is along your walking route, having memories of a tree as a kid, playing around a tree, or just the sheer awe that a big old tree can do for us when we look up at that tree. And so I share this just for maybe the educators or the people who work with groups of kids. This has been a fun activity for educators to involve students in. So I just love these pictures of, especially that redbud. Wow, look at that in Pulaski County, that redbud in full bloom, and those kids out at Science Hill adopted that tree. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to participate in it, and it really gets at the heart of why we love trees. As a start, what's your favorite tree? Okay, the second part of our Adopt a Tree program is to measure the tree. How big is your tree? Well, the simple solution is to measure it. And you can do this with fairly simple tools. If you have just a tape measure to wrap around it, we've had people use a piece of string, can wrap around get the circumference of the tree, and then hold that up to like a yardstick. Here's a group of high school students measuring a tree right around their school in Fayette County here. But of course, we know that the size of a tree plays a big role in what we call ecosystem services of that tree. So the size of the trunk of that tree relates to the size of the canopy of that tree, and all those things play together in doing all the great things that trees do for us, whether it's intercepting stormwater or sequestering carbon dioxide or cooling the environment, or all these benefits that we gain from trees. So what is your favorite tree? How big is it? What kind of tree is it? Now, okay, we're getting into a little bit of some of the technical realm here, especially in Kentucky, because we have a lot of trees that grow in our state. And not everybody knows the trees, but I know there's some excellent resources from our own extension service on tree identification. And so I know even part of this webinar is getting to know some of that palette of tree species that we have around the state. So here are some local resources to help you, those of you who are less familiar with tree species, to get to know some of those species. Now, for those of you who are, here's a quiz question for the chat. One of these leaves on the right-hand side, out of these 6 leaves, is not a native Kentucky tree, and is in fact an invasive Kentucky tree. So I'll leave it to those tree ID folks. If you know that tree that's invasive on the left, maybe type it in the chat there. So there are a lot of Kentucky trees. It's hard to know them all, and if you don't know them, it's not a problem for adopting a tree. And I'll show you how you can get around that question in the Adopt a Tree form here in just a second. So the neat output that you get when you do adopt a tree is that you are provided some ecosystem service numbers, including, I already mentioned these, but the amount of stormwater that tree intercepts in a given year, the amount of carbon that tree is sequestering, which is an important thing, and then the amount of energy that individual tree is conserving. So I'm going to move from here over to the Adopt a Tree webpage just to give you a sense of actually how simple it is to put in some of this information. So the link that was in the chat will bring you to this Adopt a Tree homepage. And under this Ready to Adopt heading, you'll see that there's a link to a web form. And this is in fact where you enter some of that information we just talked about. So you could enter your name, your email. I'm going to put my own email in here. Why did you choose this tree? This is where that narrative comes in. Talk about why this tree is you or your group's favorite. Gosh, it's going to bloom soon. That's why almost all trees are my favorite this time of year. You'd put in this circumference right here. We're just going to make something up. But here's the space where we talk about the kind of tree species. So if you know it, you could say yes. But if you have no idea and tree ID is not something that you pay attention to, you just love trees, then no, we don't know what kind of species that is. But if we look at it, okay, we see that it has needles. Let's say it's a needle tree. So we're going to say it has needles. Okay, from here, we actually do get the readout of the ecosystem benefits. And so we've utilized an existing tool called the National Tree Benefits Calculator. Some of the equations in there take the measurements and the size of the tree, and from there they can estimate the amount of stormwater that tree would intercept, for instance. And other than that, you take a picture with your tree. You saw some of those pictures of our tree adopters earlier. You can find it on the map. There's an adopt a tree map here that you can locate your tree on. For those of you in one of the 120 counties around the state, you can select your county from the list, and I'll show you why that's important here in just a second. But that's really it. A few simple short steps, and then you submit the form to adopt your tree. Of course, I've already messed it up because I didn't fill in all the information, but there you go. And so let me go back to the presentation. All right, just to give you an idea here of the ecosystem benefits, I really like to do this when we go out and do this with a group or with a school or with any individual. It's really fun to look at the differences between a small tree and a big tree. So I did this with the 2 trees out in my yard earlier this week. Well, the picture of that red bud is not from earlier this week. That's just my dream that's about to come true. But anyway, you can see the difference here between the small tree that would only intercept about 65 gallons of water in the year, and then that big silver maple that's in another tree that's in my yard there. And a much bigger tree, a much fuller canopy would intercept almost over 5,500 gallons of stormwater in a given year. That's my daughter up in the tree, so she's becoming a tree nerd herself. But anyway, these are the kinds of outputs that you can get out of the adoption process. And so I mentioned within the web form, if you're in another county around the state, it'll ask you to put in that county. And what we've actually done is built a county map of the total number of adopted trees in each Kentucky county. Here we go. Okay, so right on that adopted tree webpage, you can see the adopted Kentucky tree county map. And so I don't know, for those of you in the chat, if you're from a county outside of Fayette, maybe type it in and we could search for that county. But that's sort of how this map works. We can look around at all the different counties in the state and see how many trees have been adopted in that county. So there's a lot of empty counties out there, all right? And I know some of you are probably live in these counties. As soon as you go in there and adopt a tree, adopt your favorite tree, it's gonna light up one of these counties on the map. So I extend the challenge to you to go out, and it'd be great to get every Kentucky county lit up on the map and get a tree adopted in each county. It's a fairly easy program to participate in. It's an opportunity to get outside, wrap a tape measure around a tree, and take part in this activity. Learn a little bit about the eco benefits of your trees, and that's sort of what it's all about. So thank you to the extension webinar here. This is a really great program, and I know that those of you on the call have interest in this stuff, and I'm happy to be a part of it and to work alongside these folks to promote that. So thank you.
I
Thank
love
you,
the
Nick.
challenge.
Yes, I do too. So keep the challenge going and get a tree in your county.
Yeah, what a great way to connect people to nature, and especially some of our youth. Nick, it's really cool. I hope we can help you fill out that map and make it just really bright with the tons of adopted trees across the state.
Because that's something as a family you could easily go out and do. Just have your kids pick their favorite tree and figure out what size it is.
Yeah, I think, and the pandemic has made us appreciate even more of those opportunities to get out there and do stuff like that. So,
yeah. Well, and I think, I love that one slide where you showed the difference in how much water was intercepted based on the size of the trees. But I'm sure the youth and those that are kind of technology savvy probably like the ability to interact with a live tree, but also get to play with some technology and some websites and stuff like that. So you're bringing it all together, Nick. It's a beautiful thing. So
yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Well, and we'll be checking in on that map, folks. So get out there and adopt some trees, okay? All right. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you.
yeah, thank you.
Speaking of trees.
Tree of the week.
Yay!
Yes.
We got Laurie.
And I wonder if anyone's adopted a shellbark hickory. I wonder if they're on the list. So
We'll have to check in with Nick.
and I do want to give a plug for Adopt a Tree. It is a program that we use with the 4-H Natural Resources Environmental Science Academy. There are a lot of those kids in some of those counties are some of our kids, and they love it, and they've picked out trees that are special to them. And it is, like Nick says, it's easy to do, get you outside, get you thinking about it, and you can really expand on, make a whole program. Project Learning Tree has an offshoot with that you can do more of the literature part of it and stuff. So yeah, if you get a chance, it's great with youth, but it's also wonderful with adults as well too. I just did it with my environmental education students, and they enjoyed, like you said, outside, thoughtful, came inside, used technology. It was like, yeah, best of both worlds. So
Exactly.
All right. Ring in an endorsement for Adopt a Tree. All right.
Right.
But back to the tree of the week. Again, I wonder if anyone's adopted one of these. So this tree of the week is shellbark hickory, and it is a tree that the first time I ever noticed it was in college when I took dendrology, and we went out to the Lexington Cemetery, and there is a beautiful shellbark hickory out there. So here's a little bit about one of our great native trees, shellbark hickory.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
Hi, I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the shellbark hickory. Carya lacinosa is one of 9 hickories native to Kentucky. It is in the Juglanaceae or walnut family. Shellbark hickory is also called kingnut, bottom shellbark, and western shellbark. This distinctive deciduous tree is slow-growing and long-lived. Trees can grow up to 80 to 100 feet tall with diameters between 30 and 40 inches. Under forested conditions, it has a straight, clear trunk with a narrow oblong crown, but in open, the trees tend to have an egg-shaped crown. It can be confused with shagbark hickory, Carya ovata. Shellbark nuts are the largest of all hickory nuts and enjoyed by wildlife and people alike. The wood is hard, heavy, and strong. Shellbark hickory's range extends from New York, south to Tennessee, and west into Kansas, and while it is widely distributed, it is not very common. In Kentucky, it can be found in most of the state except extreme eastern Kentucky, and is one of the most frequent hickories in the inner bluegrass. Shellbark hickory grows on alluvial bottomlands and gentle, moist slopes, which are usually areas of crop cultivation, which has contributed to it being uncommon throughout its range. It is very shade tolerant and only exceeded by sugar maple and American beech in tolerance. It tends to have a large taproot, which can make it difficult for transplanting, so it's not widely used in landscape plantings. Shellbark hickory is a deciduous tree with large, alternately arranged, pinnately compound leaves, as you can see in the photo. The leaves usually have 7 to 9 leaflets that are obovate to lanceolate in shape. They are dark green above and light below and tend to be kind of fuzzy. The leaf rachis may also be fuzzy. Autumn leaf color is golden yellow to brown. This species is monoecious, meaning one house, so the tree will have both male and female flowers. The male flowers are on 2 to 3 inch long yellow-green catkins. and the female flowers are on short spikes and clusters at the ends of branches. Flowers appear in mid-spring after the leaves have emerged, and the flowers are wind-pollinated. Shellbark hickory fruit is a large round nut that's about 2 to 2.5 inches across. It's the largest produced by any hickory. It has an extremely thick husk, about up to at least 1/2 inch in thickness. Inside the husk is a 4 to 6 ribbed nut that is sweet and edible. The fruit ripens in autumn between September and November, and trees begin seed production around 40 years of age, with best production between 75 and 200 years. Shellbark hickory has good seed crops usually every second year, and the seeds are dispersed by gravity, birds, squirrels, and other rodents. Shellbark hickory is very distinctive. On young trees, the bark is smooth and gray with shallow interlacing ridges. As the tree grows, those interlacing ridges develop into long, loose plates, giving the tree a shaggy appearance. Hickory wood is among the hardest and strongest of woods native to the United States, and it has a very high thermal energy content when burned. Shellbark hickory heartwood is light to medium brown with a slight reddish hue, and sapwood tends to be paler yellowish brown. Cut boards with contrasting heartwood and sapwood have a rustic look and are occasionally marketed as calico hickory. It is considered non-durable regarding heartwood decay. Shellbark hickory provides food and habitat for a variety of wildlife. Ducks, quail, wild turkey, deer, squirrel, chipmunk, fox, and mice eat the nuts for food, and the shagbark hickory bark provides roosting sites for a variety of bats. Various species of hickory are lumped together and sold as hickory. The wood is used for furniture, tool handles, sporting equipment, veneer, fuel wood, and charcoal. The burning wood is also used for smoking meats. The national champion shellbark hickory, as of 2021, is in Culpeper, Virginia. It is 190 inches in circumference, 109 feet tall, with a 112-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion shellbark hickory is in Greenup County. It is 163 inches in circumference, 120 feet tall, with a 44-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest Champion Trees or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about shellbark hickory. Caria, the hickory genus, is almost exclusively an American genus, since there is only one other species found in China. The other hickory species of Europe have been extinct since the last ice age. Native Americans stored hickory nuts and made hickory milk, which was a nutritious staple of most of their cooking. The common name of shellbark comes from the bark, which appears to peel away from the tree like a shell as it ages, and the other common name, kingnut, comes from the tree's large nuts. Count the number of leaflets to distinguish shellbark from shagbark hickory. Shellbark usually has 7 leaflets and shagbark 5 leaflets. The scientific genus name Caria is from the Greek name for the walnut tree, and the species name Lacinosa means shredded or cleft into narrow divisions, referring to the loosening bark plates. Thanks for joining me to learn about this super native tree, the shellbark hickory, and I hope you get the opportunity to get out into your woodland, a local park or neighborhood, and enjoy our native trees.
Thank you, Lori. We greatly appreciate that presentation. You know, one thing, it looks like, am I right in saying that like, bats actually hide underneath?
Yep, it can be a roost site for them. It's got that loose, shaggy bark. Shagbark hickory's the same way. And we have other species of trees that have loose, not quite like shell and shagbark, but that can be used as habitat too, as a roosting space for them. So yeah.
That's really neat. Do other animals do that? I guess I should be asking Matt, but you probably know that.
Yeah, yes, the tree is a great habitat site for wildlife as well. So yeah, it's a great tree.
It's really cool bark. And I guess it's probably really easy to identify because of that.
It is. And even when it's younger, that bark will start to peel away. So you'll kind of go, it's a hickory, I'm pretty sure. And then once it gets, to a decent size, you're really going to be able to tell. Then it's trying to figure out, do I have shagbark or shellbark? Yeah. And you can count the leaflets, look at numerous sets of leaflets, because it can have 7 to 9, and sometimes shagbark can have 5 to 7 leaflets. So just count numerous to see what you got. So yeah, wonderful. Great trees.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks again for bringing it.
Sure. All right. See you later.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very cool.
We've got some pesky plants out there.
Unfortunately, we do, Renee. And, thankfully, though, we do have Dr. Ellen Crocker with us and a big part of our team here. And she's our forest health specialist. And Ellen, how are you today?
Doing great. And I always get to come on and talk doom and gloom about the things you don't want to see.
No, you're just helping us understand the challenges we're facing, right? And how to go about it. So, no, we need you. We need you, Ellen.
It's a good time, though, to be actually starting to look for these to come up.
It is. It's a good time because a lot of our invasives in this area, they'll kind of come up before our natives do. They might leaf out before our natives do, and so they kind of stick out. So it's a good time to be scouting for them. And I bring up all of these invasive issues, not because I just love tormenting everyone with everything that's coming our way, but because there's a lot you can do about them, especially if you catch them early, to keep them from becoming a problem in your woods. And so today I'm going to be talking about one of those that's really not widespread in this area yet, but it's getting there. And so if you can detect it before it becomes a problem, you're going to be way better off than if you're kind of playing catch up afterwards. So hopefully you can see my screen. Does that look all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So today's pesky plant of the month is a newer invasive that has been rapidly increasing in our area, and that's lesser celandine. It's also called fig buttercup because it's in the buttercup family, and it's got these beautiful, shiny yellow flowers, and it looks pretty. You can see why people might see this and like this, but it's got some downsides. So in addition to being toxic to humans and wildlife if consumed, it will take over rapidly. So today on Pesky Plants, we're going to be talking a little bit about this lesser celandine, what it looks like, and what you can do to stop it if you find it in your woods. So the reason it's a problem is that it will take over very rapidly and forms really dense mats that can cover the ground and exclude other species. If it was just there looking pretty in your woods, we wouldn't mind it in the slightest, right? The pop of yellow flowers first thing in the spring, who wouldn't like to see that sunny sight? But it's not just there, it's doing negative things. So it's kind of carpeting everything, preventing the other spring ephemerals you want to be seeing, and then it goes dormant. So it's going to leave that area exposed during the other parts of the year. And it truly is a spring ephemeral. So like many of the spring ephemerals that we do want, those beautiful wildflowers, this one is just started to leaf out right now. I've got a little patch that I watch and try to get rid of, and it's just put out its leaves recently. And within the next few weeks, it'll probably start sending out these shiny yellow flowers. So something to look for right now. And it's originally from Europe and Northern Africa and Asia, and it was brought to the US as an ornamental plant. You can imagine why, right? But it does not stay put in those garden settings. So don't be fooled by this one. This is another that you don't want in your garden. So the first place you might see lesser celandine moving in is along the side of streams, rivers, and creeks. And here you can see it just blanketing the edge of that creek. And I have seen that before in northern Kentucky. We have many areas that kind of look like this, or if it's along a floodplain, that entire floodplain might be filled with lesser celandine. If you catch it right during that window, right during that late February to early April window. After that, again, it's going to go dormant and you might not see it. But it can move up and out of these areas. So it can then move into those more upland forested sites. And that's not all. I have seen it in many urban landscapes. So it's definitely not restricted to wet areas. And here's one that's popping up in a lawn. Unfortunately, it's a pretty flower, and so people will plant it in their garden. And I've seen it in spots here in Kentucky where it's clear that someone planted some, but what they did not expect is that it would take over their entire front yard and then move out into all of their neighbors' yards and kind of medians and other areas. So definitely not something you want to find in your garden. So how does this spread? In addition to people moving it around, it has many features that make it a problematic invasive because it's easy to move it accidentally and it moves itself in waterways. So if you were to look under the ground with lesser celandine, what you'd see are these tiny bulbs. That makes it, and lots of them for one clump, you might get lots of these little bulbs. It makes it very difficult to pull up lesser celandine. You can do that, especially if you catch them when they're small, or do this repeatedly year after year. But if you're just kind of pulling it out of the ground, what you're going to do is pop off those little bulbs that then are just going to sprout up and form new plants. So if you're pulling it up, you really want to kind of dig it up and remove that soil instead of just kind of pulling the top part. You'll leave all these little bulbs in the ground. It also has even tinier little bulbs that are in the above ground portion. So it's really easy to move this around if there's erosion, if there's a waterway, or even if you've got mud on your boots or equipment, or some animal that's moving around in muddy areas with its hooves. You can imagine just how easy it would be to move this around. A couple other points for identification. It has these shiny dark green leaves. They are heart-shaped, which is, we just had Valentine's Day, so kind of a distinctive heart-shaped leaf. And they're very waxy, and they can have this dappled, water-spotted appearance when you look at them. And again, while they are lovely, they are toxic, both to us and to livestock, so not something you want to consume. That can result in, I've heard, vomiting, nausea, dizziness, and other symptoms. So not something you want there either. So when it comes to managing lesser celandine, here are some of my recommendations and tools in your toolbox. And the first and easiest one is just don't plant it. Don't get fooled and don't move it around. And if you are moving any soil or you're working in an area that has this, be careful that you're not accidentally transporting it as well. There are lots of great native alternatives that provide a beautiful yellow color in the early spring, from green and gold to celandine poppy. And I love celandine poppy, which I think you could easily kind of confuse just from the name with lesser celandine. They both have pretty yellow flowers. They both bloom in the spring. Celandine poppy we like, and it's a native, and it's a great choice both in the woods, but also in urban landscapes. If you're trying to landscape with more natives, I really recommend it. Lesser celandine, don't do it. My second tip is to catch it before it spreads. Once you have an entire floodplain that's filled with it, it's really tough because at that point, it's more about preventing it from moving into other areas than managing it right there. So if you can identify it when it's just a few plants here and there, you might be able to pull it up. And again, you want to really make sure that you're getting that entire root system. Being careful, because with those tiny bulbs, you don't want to dislodge those and leave those in the soil. You want to dig it up and remove that from the site. Another potential option with these kind of smaller infestations would be covering it with a tarp, using some landscape staples to hold that in place and just leaving that there for a season or two. Now, is that going to kill everything else underneath it? Yes. It's just smothering it and covering it there, but it's one option for lesser celandine as well. Really, though, where people have had the most success is going to be with an herbicide. And a key point about that is that this herbicide must be applied before flowering. After the plant starts to flower, it's not going to be very effective at being systemic, so being taken up by the root system. Because what you really want, you can kill the top part, but what you want is that to be taken up by the roots and kill that whole plant. And most commonly used herbicide for lesser celandine is glyphosate. And that there are formulations that would be safe in those more kind of aquatic systems. But really, when we're talking about herbicide, you've got a very limited window of time there when the leaves are up and out, but it's not flowering. So right now and in the next few weeks would be ideal. And then this is not a once and done thing. It never is with invasive plant management, but even if you apply herbicide one year, you're going to want to make sure to monitor that the next year, the year after that, catch anything you might have missed or that didn't work, catch those other bulbs that are sprouting up from the soil. And whether you're digging it up or using herbicide or tarping, using a different technique to manage those. There's other techniques as well, but those are some of the most common ones. And if this is an issue in a lawn setting, there are lots of other herbicides that you could use that might be safe for the grass, but kill the celandine. But if you're talking about a woodland where you've got a diversity of native species you want to keep, it's important to catch it, right during that window when it's leafed out, nothing else is, and you're unlikely to have those non-target impacts on the native plants that you want to keep. And here's a photo of a student that I worked with at the Arboretum Woods here at the University of Kentucky. We found a small patch a few years ago. And you can see he's scouting, he's looking carefully to see if he can find any patches of it. And he hasn't yet, but I think he's going to find one in just a moment. And so you've kind of got to be careful while you're looking, while you're scanning, that you find the celandine, because it's not always obvious until it flowers. So just kind of something to keep in mind there. So this is just kind of from some of my experience. As I mentioned, the University of Kentucky Arboretum had a infestation that in 2019, I noticed, wow, look at this. The whole kind of back section here in the woods had celandine in it. And this really came up all of a sudden. It, was not something that I had noticed the year before. And then suddenly I saw a ton of it. And I imagine that it probably came in from a neighboring property. Somebody might have it in their garden. But you can see just kind of how dense in just a year or two that it had been there, it had formed this kind of mat. So following that discovery, they were really proactive about managing it. And we used a wide range of techniques, from pulling it up to glyphosate to tarps. And you can see what it looked like last year. So you can see some of those tarps that we had located, but very little. There's a couple yellow flowers here or there, but really in just 2 years, we were able to knock it back and prevent it from spreading further. And I think that that's a key takeaway I want to leave you all with, is that it can be easy to feel discouraged when it comes to invasive plant management. But we have to celebrate those success stories that were successful because it was never really a problem. If you can catch it when it's at this stage, that's a lot easier than trying to play catch up once it's everywhere. So I encourage you this year to really have your eyes peeled for lesser celandine, as well as other invasive plants this spring. And if you see them, to manage them early before they have taken over. There are lots of great resources out there for invasive plant management, from different books to help you identify species and distinguish them from native lookalikes, to resources on how to effectively manage those plants. And I encourage you to check those out. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me at KY Forest Health, and you can find us online and in social media as well.
Well, thank you, Ellen. We greatly appreciate that. And, which herbicides could you use to kill this?
So there's actually a wide range of herbicides that would be effective against lesser celandine. The big thing to consider when it comes to them, though, is what else is growing there. So if this is an issue in your woods, you really, it's not that you don't want to have lesser celandine, it's that you want to have great native species,
Mhm.
and the celandine gets in the way of that, which is why we don't like it. But if in your management you're hurting all those native species, you don't want to do that. That's kind of shooting yourself in the foot right there. So you want to pick something that's going to help you in that process and apply it in a way that's going to minimize that non-target damage. So it's not going to be taken up through the soil and affect other plants. It's just going to affect that celandine that you sprayed. And so glyphosate is really commonly used because of that, and because of the fact that, again, this will sometimes grow in wet areas, and you want to be careful to read the label and make sure that you're using something that can be applied in those wet areas. Now, if we're talking a grassy landscape area, there's a lot more options that'll all be effective against the celandine. And so there's a lot out there that you can find online. And I'd say really the key thing is making sure that you're not damaging things you want to keep, as well as getting rid of that celandine.
Yeah.
And another thing I would say is that, as with any invasive plant management, it is not one done. It's going to be a continuous thing, not just for celandine, but for other things too. And I encourage everyone to kind of view that as, not something you do once and then you can just forget about, but a continuous thing. Whatever tool in the toolbox you're using, whether it's digging it up or tarping, you're going to have to kind of revisit that regularly.
Well, you bring up so many great points, Ellen. I love the ones about finding this stuff early, right? Can make your life so much easier. And then also making that part of your kind of routine, right? You're always kind of on the scout for these, you're following up on your treatments, and it's just kind of part of the normal dealing with your woodlands, part of life. Unfortunately.
It is. Unfortunately, these invasive plants, they're here to stay. And so, it's I think that you might not like what they're going to do in your woods, though. And so if you can prevent them from being established, it's a lot easier than trying to fix things once those plants have already established.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm sorry. I was going to say, and if you're dealing with obviously larger issues and stuff like that, there are some conservation programs available to kind of help cover some of those costs, to work with your foresters on that, or wildlife.
Yeah, that's a great point, is make sure to reach out to your forester and check with NRCS to see available funds. Lesser celandine, like unfortunately many of our invasives, is a problem in our urban areas. It's a problem in our woods. It doesn't stay put. So it might have started out in your garden just fine, and then it took over your garden, and then it took over the woods near your house. And so, depending on where you are and what it's like, there might be different tools available to you. So make sure to check with your local resources about that.
And I am assuming that this is not the only invasive plant that we'll be looking for this spring.
No, unfortunately. There are others that are going to pop up this spring, and I think we'll continue this theme with our next pesky plant, going through the different invasive plants that you can be on the lookout for, because it's again a great time, even if you don't notice your celandine until it's already flowering, and that's a little bit late for management. Now for next year, now you can prioritize that right when it leaves out. Same with calorie pear, another invasive plant that you don't want to see, especially in your old field sites or along edges. Right when it flowers, it sticks out because nothing else is flowering. Then it's very early, and that's a great time to kind of flag some trees to come back to later. We'll talk more about that, and make sure to stay tuned for more pesky plants.
Hey, keep it coming, Ellen. The work that you're doing can help all of us take better care of our woods and make them more healthy and more resilient. So thank you for all you do, really.
Thanks for having me on today.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Good show.
Covered a lot of ground again, Billy.
I know now we laid down a challenge to all of our viewers, right? And all of our viewers, friends and family members and acquaintances, go adopt some trees, right? And scout out for some of these little things that might be popping up in the woods around you, for sure.
Right. And not only are they, could be just if you have woodlands, but it sounds like you can have them in urban areas too. So you can look for them no matter where you are.
Yeah, no doubt. So a good show. Thank you all so much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it. We're here every Wednesday at 11, and we hope to see you in future weeks.
Yep. All right. Until then, take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
woods today.